Am I the asshole for refusing to help my brother when my family showed up at my company to reconnect 5 years after my dad gave away my entire college fund to fund his potential?
Welcome to the book Friday Story. Today's story is about a father who gave his daughter $175,000 college fund to her brother because he believed in his potential one. 5 years later, after building a successful company from nothing, he finally comes face to face with a family who abandoned her. Let's get started to see what's happened.
My dad sat me down the summer after I graduated high school and told me he had made a decision. He said college wasn't the right path for everyone. He said my brother Marcus had a lot of potential and needed a real opportunity to develop it. He said the money that had been set aside for my education was going to be redirected. He said I should look into learning a trade. I asked how much. Had been in the fund, he said. $175,000. I got up and went to my room. I packed what I could carry. I left the next morning with $340 in cash, my high school diploma, and a wooden sewing box that had belonged to my grandmother, some background on the $175 my dad had built that fund over years. It was mine. It was documented as mine. What he did with it, moving it without my consent, without legal authority, without any process, constituted a breach of fiduciary duty. I didn't know that term when I was 18. I learned it later that my brother Marcus is 2 years older than me. He is not, by any academic measure, someone you would look at and think, this is where the money should go. His grades were average at best. He had started and abandoned business ideas before the age of 20. My dad believed in him with the specific conviction that some parents have about their sons regardless of evidence. The fund was redirected to give Marcus the opportunity my dad believed he deserved. I was told to learn a trade that my grandmother Eleanor died when I was 16. She was the person in my family who saw me most clearly, my interest in art and design, the way I thought about visuals, the patience I had for making things. She used to sit with me at her kitchen table, and we would work on things together. The sewing box was from her workroom. 2 weeks after I left home, a lawyer named Richard called me. He said my grandmother had established a small trust before she died. He said she had set it up specifically for me and specifically without my parents' knowledge. He said the value was $12,000 and that it was mine to access whenever I needed it, she had known. She had prepared. I sat in the single room I was renting, near a bus route, and I thought about my grandmother at her kitchen table, and I cried for the first time since I had left home. Then I made a plan. I got a job at a coffee shop. I enrolled in a graphic design program at a community college. I used the $12,000 carefully. Tuition, rent, equipment, the things that couldn't wait. I worked every shift they would give me, and I studied everything else. As in my second year, I met Maggie. She was a creative director at a mid-sized agency, and she came into the coffee shop most mornings. She noticed the sketchbook I kept behind the counter. She asked about it once, and then again, and then she asked if I had ever thought about doing this professionally. I told her it was what I was studying. She gave me her card. I called the next day. I interned with her for a year. Then I worked for her. Then we started talking about what it would look like to do something on our own. 5 years after I left home with $340 and a sewing box, I co-founded a design company with Maggie Owens. We called it Owens and Hilton. We have an office in downtown Hartford. We have 40 employees. I am 23 years old. Last month, my family came to the office. I had been mentioned in a local business publication. Someone had written about the company, and my name was in the article with a photo. My dad saw it. He called my office line, which I did not recognize, and my assistant put it through before I could stop it. He said it was so good to hear my voice. He said the family had been thinking about me. He said he and my mom and Marcus were going to be in Hartford and could they stop by. I said I would have 30 minutes on Thursdays. Am I the asshole for what I'm planning to say? Because I know why they're coming. I know about Marcus. The business ideas failed. There is debt. My dad is approaching retirement without the savings he expected, and Marcus is not the return on investment he believed he would be. They are coming to reconnect with me because they have seen what I built. And they need something? I am 30 minutes away from that meeting, and I need someone outside of this to tell me if what I'm planning to say is wrong to long. Didn't raid. Dad took my $175,000 college fund at 18 to give to my brother's potential. Left with $340 and my grandma's sewing box. Grandma had left me a secret $12,000 trust. Worked at a coffee shop, studied graphic design, met a creative director who became my business partner. 5 years later, co-founded a design company in downtown Hartford with 40 employees at age 23. Family saw me in the press and wants to reconnect. I know they need money. Meeting is in 30 minutes. Am I the asshole if I don't pretend that's not what's happening? Edit. Meeting just ended. Update coming tonight. You added it too. It went the way I thought it would go. Writing it out now.
They started to leave you feeling heartbroken and genuinely satisfied all at once. But what really gets me is the O'Keefe's tone. How completely calm they sound while describing a level of betrayal that would absolutely destroy most people. It's the kind of quiet stability that only comes when you already survived the worst of the storm. Imagine being 18 years old and hearing your old father casually design your future matters less than your brother's potential. That's the kind of betrayal that sticks with someone forever. And somehow, instead of giving up, he builds an entire life from almost nothing. Just $340 and sewing box from his grandmother. And one person who finally believed in him. But now the family suddenly wants to reconnect right after seeking success. Yeah, that timing feels way too convenient. I think everyone watching can already sense where this meeting is heading. The dad probably still believes he can explain everything away, and Marcus might even expect half after wasting the opportunity he was handed. And what I'm really curious about is whether the OP is going to stay calm or finally saying everything he's been holding in for 5 years.
Update 1. That even Angie met them in the conference room rather than my office. My assistant brought water. I closed the doors. My dad started with family. He talked about how much he had missed me. He said distance had a way of creating misunderstandings and that he hoped we could move past them. He used the word reconnect 3 times in 4 minutes. He looked around the conference room while he talked, at the awards on the wall and the windows looking out over the Hartford skyline. My brother Marcus sat across from me and didn't look at me directly. He looked like someone who had been rehearsing something and then forgot it. At my mom, Diane, sat at the end of the table. She was quiet. I let my dad finish. When he stopped talking, I said I was glad they had come. Then I said I wanted to be honest about a few things before we talked about anything else. I told my dad that what he had done with my education fund was not a family decision. It was a unilateral decision made with assets that were legally designated for me. I said the word fiduciary and watched his expression change. I said I had had 5 years to understand what had happened, and I was not confused about it. I asked Marcus directly how the $175,000 had been used and what the return had been. He said things had been complicated. I said I was sure they had. I told my dad I was not going to provide financial support to Marcus, and I was not going to pretend that was not what this visit was about. I told him I was glad the company was doing well, and I hoped it continued too. I told him I had 30 minutes, and we had used most of them. My dad said I had always been cold. I said the $175,000 was mine. You didn't give me anything you could take back. He didn't respond to that as my mom had been quiet for the entire meeting. When my dad and Marcus stood to leave, she stood with them. At the door, she stopped. She looked at me for a moment, at the office, at the awards, at me specifically, in a way that felt different from how she had looked at me when I was 18, she said. I'll call you. Then she left. I sat in the conference room alone for a while after they were gone. Maggie knocked and asked if I was okay. I said yes. She brought me coffee and didn't ask anything else, which was exactly right.
Well, actually, this Abbas felt it really satisfying, but also kind of sad at the same time. You can tell the OP didn't go into that meeting looking for revenge or Brahma. He just wanted honestly. And honestly, the father calling him cold adder still in his future feels almost unbelievable. Like somehow the son became the villain just because he refused to be used twice. But the moment that really stood out to me was the mother at the door. That tiny, I called you, suddenly changed the whole energy of the story. It's made me wonder if she knew more than she'd ever admitted, or if seeing what he built finally forced her to realize what was she taken from him. Either way, I have a feeling this family situation is far from over. So let's move to the attitude to see what's happened.
Update 2. Finamy mom called 3 days after the meeting. She asked if she could see me without my dad and without Marcus. I said yes. We met at a restaurant near my apartment. Just the two of us, for the first time I could remember. She didn't offer a complete explanation. She said she had made choices over many years that she was reckoning with. She said watching what happened in that conference, watching me speak and hearing what I said, had crystallized something she had been avoiding thinking about for a long time. She told me she had filed for divorce. She is 53 years old. She has been out of the workforce for most of my life. She said she had been taking some courses and had applied for a few positions. She said it was hard and she was doing it anyway. I listened. I didn't offer to fix it or accelerate it or smooth anything. I just listened. We have spoken twice since then. The calls are short and careful. I don't know what the relationship becomes. I'm not rushing it in any direction that my dad retired with less than he had planned. The details are not something I've followed closely, but I understand the situation is not comfortable. Marcus is working at a car dealership. I know this because the cousin, who told me, seemed to think it was significant. Information that I needed. I let it land without reaction. The sewing box sits on my desk. It's not decorative. Exactly. It's just a wooden box with compartments and some things my grandmother kept in it that I never removed. Thread, a few needles, a small pair of scissors with worn handles. I don't sew. I kept the box because it was hers and because it was in my bag when I left home and it has been with me every day since my grandmother left me. $12,000 and a sewing box and the knowledge that someone who knew me had prepared something for me, quietly and without fanfare, against the possibility that I would need it, that is worth more than $175,000, not financially. In every other way, Maggie and I are expanding the company. New clients, a second project lead, conversations about eventually opening a second office. I am 23 years old, and the work is good, and the people I work with chose to be here that my dad told me to learn a trade. I did. I just didn't learn the one he had in mind. I learned how to build something from the materials available, how to find the people who would take you seriously, how to sit across a conference table from someone who once held significant power over your life and speak to them without shaking. I learned that your grandmother's $12,000 and the belief behind it can carry you further than someone else's $175,000 and the conditions attached to it. I'm not angry anymore. I let it go the way you let go of things that cost you too much to carry. What I kept is this sewing box, not the asshole. But the question I actually needed to answer wasn't whether I was wrong. It was whether I was allowed to have built this without their blessing, and to feel good about it, and to sit across from them in a conference room and not flinch. I was allowed. I do feel good about it. I did not flinch too long. Didn't read. Meeting went as expected. Dad talked about family. Marcus didn't look at me. Mom was quiet. I said what I had prepared to say, including the fiduciary breach, and the direct question about what happened to the $175,000 refused to help Marcus. Dad said I was cold. I said the money was mine and he hadn't given me anything he could take back. Mom called 3 days later and told me she filed for divorce and is taking courses and applying for work. Dad retired with less than he planned. Marcus is at a car dealership. The sewing box is on my desk. Owens & Hilton is expanding. I let the anger go. I kept the box.
Honestly, this story made me feel angry, relief, emotional, and really fond of someone I don't even know. Like, you can actually feel how lonely he must been in 80s, seeing their wife, his own far, basically decides his future matters better than his father's. Potential. That's heartbreakingly hard to read. And I think a lot of people listening gruffly felt that same pit in their stomach. But at the same time, watching him slowly rebuild a life for himself was so satisfying. Not in the petty revenge way. More in that quiet, emotional kind of way where you just rooting for someone to rally. If the Rents model honestly rocked my heart a little, the fact that he saw everything coming and repairs something for him in secret, that wasn't just the $12,000 that were love, trust, as someone saying, I believe in you, before anyone else did. And the sewing box at the end, that's his heart, out of everything he can. That's what he chosen to keep closest to him. I don't know. There's just something really beautiful and deeply human about that. So let me know what you guys think about this one, because I do honestly want to hear your dogs. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to Pop Compare This Story, and I will see you at the next one. Goodbye.